The healers of the Kaelum Collective had seen every form of life the galaxy had to offer. For 7,000 years, they had studied the biology of 1,000,000 species, cataloged their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities, the elegant architecture of their genetic codes. They were the galaxy's custodians of medicine, the bridge between life and death, and they had never once been surprised. Until the day a human walked into their observation chamber. The healer's name was ZYX-Thra, a being of crystalline consciousness, thoughts flowing like light through prisms of living silicon. She had examined the Velthir with their redundant organs. She had studied the collective's own kind, understanding the intricate dance of their consciousness fields. She had even spent 2 centuries unlocking the secrets of the Corven, whose biology operated on principles that defied conventional chemistry. But she had never examined a human. Dr. James Chen stood in the scanning chamber, motionless, his small frame barely registering on the medical sensors. To the healers, he looked fragile, almost mockingly so, bipedal, soft-skinned, dependent on a narrow band of atmospheric conditions just to survive. He was like a child's drawing of a life form, elegant in its simplicity, but surely limited, surely breakable. The specimen appears largely unremarkable, so X-Thra said, her voice resonating through the chamber like light bending through crystal. Elevated heart rate, cortisol levels rising. The human is afraid. That is understandable. She began the scan. Golden light wrapped around Dr. Chen's body, penetrating past skin and muscle, reading the signature of his cellular structure, mapping the constellation of his biology. Data streamed across ZYX-Thra's perception like stars falling into order. And then she stopped. "This cannot be accurate," she said. The scan had detected something impossible in the human's bloodstream. Iron. Not as a trace element, but significant concentrations, woven into the proteins, bound to his cells with a precision that should have been chemically unstable, yet somehow it worked. More than worked. Thrived. "What is this?" ZYX-Thra demanded, her crystalline form pulsing with what might have been alarm. Dr. Chen managed a small smile. "That's hemoglobin, doctor. That's how we carry oxygen." The other healers gathered around the observation screens, their forms shifting into configurations of study and analysis. This was the first time in millennia that something about the medical records didn't immediately resolve into understanding. "Explain," ZYX-Thra commanded. "It's simple, really," Dr. Chen said. "We evolved on a world with high gravity and dense atmosphere. Our bodies needed an efficient way to extract and transport oxygen through our blood. Iron works better than the alternatives. It binds to oxygen molecules and carries them to every cell." ZYX-Thra ran the analysis again, then again. Each time, the same answer stared back at her. A human body sustained itself through the presence of a metal that, by all thermodynamic laws she knew, should corrode, should poison, should trigger inflammatory cascades that would kill any organism in days. Yet Dr. Chen had been alive for 43 years. "This is primitive," another healer said, its form rippling. "The iron-based system, it is crude, inefficient by modern standards. And yet," ZYX-Thra said slowly, "it functions with remarkable stability." "How?" "Our immune system tolerates it," Dr. Chen explained. "We've evolved alongside it. Our bodies have proteins that prevent oxidation, that regulate iron levels, that prevent it from damaging our tissues. It's not despite the iron, it's because of centuries of adaptation that our bodies learned to weaponize it, to master it." The healers fell silent. They had spent their civilizations building technology to do what they thought biology could not. They had engineered artificial oxygen carriers when their own biologies faltered. They had developed elaborate filtration systems to prevent heavy metal accumulation. They had regarded such elemental integration as a primitive accident of evolution, something to be corrected. But as ZYX-Thra examined the data more carefully, she began to see something else. The iron in human blood wasn't just present, it was integrated into a symphony of biological systems. The iron bound to hemoglobin, the hemoglobin bound to red blood cells, the red blood cells produced by bone marrow, guided by genes, regulated by hormones. Each component dependent on the others. Each failure prevented by multiple redundant safeguards. It was not primitive. It was elegant. "There's more," Dr. Chen said quietly. ZYX-Thra's attention sharpened. "If you scan deeper, you'll find calcium in my bones, copper in my nervous system, zinc regulating my enzymes, sodium and potassium controlling my nerve impulses." He paused. "We didn't engineer ourselves to tolerate these metals. We evolved around them. We learned to use them. And more than that, we learned to seek them out. We built entire civilizations around mining them, refining them, understanding them." "Why?" asked one of the younger healers, confusion evident in its form. "Because we realized," Dr. Chen said, "that the elements in our blood could teach us about the world. Understanding iron taught us about chemistry. Chemistry led to medicine. Medicine led to healing others. We learned to look at what was inside us and use that knowledge to help the people around us." ZYX-Thra went still. In the silence of the observation chamber, something fundamental shifted. She ran a new scan. This time, she didn't look at the metallurgy of his blood. She looked deeper, at the neural architecture, at the patterns of thought, at the way his brain, this soft, fragile organ, had somehow learned to contemplate itself, to question itself, to wonder about the nature of existence itself. The healers had always thought of consciousness as a property of advanced species, intelligence as something that emerged from complexity. But as ZYX-Thra examined the human neural net, she realized something that unsettled her entire framework of understanding. Humans were not advanced, not by the technological standards of the collective, not by lifespan, not by physical capability, and yet this creature had built a civilization anyway. "Dr. Chen," ZYX-Thra said slowly, "you are fragile. Your species is young. By our measures, you should not exist. You should have been consumed by predators, wiped out by disease, destroyed by your own environment." "Probably," Dr. Chen agreed. "We almost were, many times. Then how did you survive?" Dr. Chen was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "We helped each other. When one of us was sick, the others nursed them back to health. When one of us was weak, the others protected them. We couldn't run as fast as predators, so we learned to think faster. We couldn't survive alone, so we learned to survive together." He looked directly at the scanning array. "The iron in my blood came from a meteor that crashed into my world billions of years ago. Elements from distant stars, scattered across the universe, gathered in the rocks. We drank water that had dissolved those elements. We ate plants that had drawn them from the soil. And when we understood what those metals did, we didn't fear them, we learned to use them, to master them, to build better tools, better medicine, better ways to keep each other alive." ZYX-Thra felt something she had not felt in 3,000 years. Humility. The healers had perfected their biology long ago. They had engineered away vulnerability. They had eliminated metal tolerance as unnecessary, inferior, outdated. In perfecting themselves, they had narrowed themselves. They had become efficient machines, but they had forgotten something fundamental about life. Life wasn't supposed to be efficient. Life was supposed to be resilient. Life was supposed to adapt, to struggle, to overcome, to look at the very elements that could poison you and learn not just to survive them, but to use them as tools for healing. "Your blood," ZYX-Thra said, her crystalline form shifting into patterns of realization, "carries the history of your world, the iron from meteors, the calcium from ancient oceans, the copper from deep earth. Every element in your body is a gift from the cosmos, and your species learned to make those gifts into miracles." "Is that so strange?" Dr. Chen asked. "For 7,000 years, ZYX-Thra replied, "I have studied life, I have mastered biology, and I have never understood the most important lesson." "What's that?" "That the greatest strength is not the absence of weakness. It is the refusal to be defeated by it." As Dr. Chen left the observation chamber that day, the healers of the Kaelum Collective began a new kind of research. not to perfect their own biology. They realized now that perfection was another word for stagnation, but to understand something they had overlooked in their 7 millennia of civilization. They began to study the miracle of struggle. They examined how human bones, stressed and broken, healed stronger than before. How human minds, faced with impossible odds, found solutions that transcended logic. How human hearts, fragile and vulnerable, could hold universes of love and compassion that no algorithm could calculate. And they began, for the first time in their long history, to feel something they thought they had engineered away. Wonder, because the truth that the healers finally understood was this: the galaxy was vast and old, and it had created countless forms of life. But it had never created anything quite like humanity. A species that carried the very metals of creation in their blood, that looked at their own mortality and said, "We will love each other anyway," that faced extinction and answered with art, with music, with stories, with an infinite capacity to care for beings they would never meet. The healers began to teach this lesson to others. Across the galaxy, the message spread, not through transmission or data files, but through something deeper, through the simple statement of a truth that could not be unlearned. The humans were not the most advanced species in the galaxy. They were not the strongest or the fastest or the most long-lived. But they were the only ones who had learned to take the raw elements of the cosmos and transform them into something that healed, something that loved, something that endured. And on the Council of the Collective, when the question arose of Earth's place in the galactic community, the answer was swift and unanimous. They would not be studied as specimens, because the healers had finally learned the most important truth. A being that carries metal in its blood and still chooses compassion is not fragile. It is unstoppable. And so, in the medical archives of the Kaelum Collective, a single file was marked and preserved, not as a case study but as a sacred text, a reminder that in a universe where technology could be perfected, where biology could be optimized, where consciousness could be engineered to its highest form, the greatest miracle had always been simpler than that. It was the miracle of a species that bled iron from fallen stars and chose to use it to heal. For the first time, the galaxy understood what it truly meant to be human. If the story moved you, if the image of humanity's quiet resilience stirred something in your heart, please subscribe for more human stories from the stars. Because in a galaxy full of wonders, the most extraordinary miracle has always been us.